Ja, hvorfor skal jeg snakke på engelsk? Jamen, jeg kunne forsøge på dansk-norsk, men det vil måske blive patetisk. Så kunne jeg forsøge på svensk, men det vil jo bare være respektløst. Og mit norsk er ikke så godt, så derfor så går jeg på engelsk. Men jeg tænkte, I var jo kommet med en norsk titel, så derfor så holdt jeg titlen. Men alle andre slides herfra, de bliver så på engelsk, og det håber jeg går godt. So I work with cloud-based security. Now, you're talking about strategy, you're talking about cloud solutions, you're talking about productivity. So one thing that Symantec saw some years back was that the IT industry, as we know it, is rapidly moving towards the cloud. And I can give you a short anecdote on that. I used to work at a very big IT hardware company, a global company, and I had lots of great colleagues 6-7 years back. And just last year, I was standing at the IDC conference for cloud solutions. It was very funny. I was looking at one of my old colleagues was working now with EMC and VMware in the cloud. 2 of my old colleagues were standing at the Cisco thing. And I had another colleague from the same team, all from the same team, that was standing at the Verizon team. And that just shows me that we have a saying in Denmark that there are 800 people in the IT industry in Denmark, and everybody knows everybody, like I'm sure you all know. And now apparently all of my old team were in the same industry, which is now cloud IT. That's kind of a funny way of looking at it. So I just flew in today from the cloud. I just landed. And I'm here. I have 200 slides. Well, maybe skip 181 of those, and we'll just rush through it. So why are we concerned about cloud-based security solution at Symantec? Well, there are several aspects to that. So I'll try to just reach into how the threat landscape is evolving, because maybe that will give you an idea. But what you're really facing today, if I can get this thing to work, is that the market, as we know it, is also moving. Used to be, when I worked at that big hardware company, we were all system-centric. It was all about buying the right hardware and the right software, right? That was the way it was. And now we're seeing that the market is moving towards being information-centric. So it's no longer about the structured data that we have on our network. It's no longer about centralizing information. It's no longer about on-premise security. Because I bet that at least half of you in this room have a smartphone. And I bet that you also use it for your business. And I bet your users are asking to get more smart devices. And it puts a lot of strain and pressure on your ability to keep information safe. It's no longer about the system. What it's all about now is it's all about the information. It's all about keeping information safe. It has been forever, but now it's more important than ever. So we see an explosion now into the trend that, well, I have a son. How many in here have children? Great, almost everybody can relate to what I'm going to talk about then. My son, he's 14. His main communication to the world is Facebook. When he turns 18, gets out of school, hopefully he'll get out of school a little bit later, not because he's stupid, but because I hope he gets more education. He will go to his employer and he will work from the frame that is, you guys are going to support me. You guys have to deliver the platform that I usually talk to my friends. And I'm going to use that platform to do business. We all know this, right? We all see the trend. And it's going to become even more real as we go along. Puts a lot of pressure, because cloud-based solutions in terms of productivity, as I'm sure you've already heard from legal and strategic perspectives, where are my data? Who can access them? Imagine this. It's a real scenario. I know of a guy who worked at a public company, a noted company, and they were in talks with another company to buy them. And it just so happens that that day he was really focused on his work when he got home and posted on Facebook, and he said, "Oh, I really look forward to us acquiring company X." Ooh. And that's the real world, and we have to deal with that. Not just from a backup and virtualization and infrastructure perspective, but from a how do we control the information flow to the external world perspective. If that doesn't keep you guys up at night, then I don't know what will. It certainly causes a lot of interesting discussions around the table with some of the customers I know. Now, let me just dive into a little bit about what this actually means in terms of Facebooking and being online with everything. So you can see now that you have these infrastructures in the cloud, you have all these apps that your users require. This means that your people are the new perimeter. It means that it's not about getting the right network infrastructure in place. That will help. Sure it will. But it's basically not about that. How do you control and manage all the devices and apps that are out there when they're on the fly? This trend of being information-centric is causing an information explosion that, we've always talked about information. And we've always talked about it exploding. And we can keep talking about it because it's never going to go away. This is like a slide I always should have with me, but I don't even need to show it because everybody knows it's going on, right? You're dealing with storage and platforms and solutions you need to make every day on how to make data available and how to make them safe and how to make sure you can recover them. So you know that storage is growing, information is expanding everywhere. And the more cloud-based the world is getting, the more you can get an app for that base the world is getting, the more data you need to make sure it's safe, right? It's a bit slow. This means, and this is a true fact, it comes from our own research, combined with several big research parties, that 9 out of 10 people in the room, if asked, cannot respond to what your risks are in terms of your information. You have to go home and do a complete audit and research with your users and everything else. That's a big challenge. Would we like to be able to come up with the answer instantly? Yeah, that should be a strategic goal that you can actually, or not a strategic goal, but a goal that you can actually produce that data and that knowledge, right? We know corporate information grows every year. We can't control which platform it grows on. One thing that scares me, or should I say amazes me, and this is from our own cloud knowledge and from interview with customers, we see that every day we send out email. I don't know if you went through it with the guy or the legal guy before, but in principle, every mail contains personal sensitive information because it has names in there and it can be tagged to everything. But if we exclude that and we talk about social security numbers or we talk about credit card numbers or we talk about confidential data about your business, 600 email messages a day. That's a little bit more than I produce of gray hair per year. A little bit more. I dyed it. But that's a lot. If I was in the IT decision maker role and I looked at that flow of information, I would probably look into, okay, is that good? Basically today, how many of you could live without email for 2 days? The guy with the camera, he could. It's like, yeah, I run the camera. That's fine. But none of us could, right? We send anything and everything and receive anything and everything on email. How many of you have an encryption solution in place to make sure that whatever needs to be secure is secure when you send it out of your domain? Show of hands. Wow. So there's, as my old sales manager would call it, there's a potential. So those are some hardcore facts. What is also a fact is that the attacks are different now. There's more information available to the guys that attack us. or girls. I don't mean to be sexist. But what we saw back in the day, 10 years ago, we saw maybe a few thousand different viruses each year. We all remember some of the big hero names of viruses. It was all about Trojans. I could run around with a floppy drive and infect a PC, and then I could laugh and take it into the next one. Not that I did it, I was in school, chatting. It was all about mass mailing worms. So it was all about infecting the inbox and moving it on to the other stuff, right? I would like to see a hand if you haven't been infected by one of those before. Okay, one hand. So we all know that. 4 years ago, we saw the first botnets really came into play and started really harassing us, and that's where cloud-based email security really grew, because that's when your CEO came and said, damn it, I'm really, really tired that I'm getting all this spam. Do something about it. And instead of adding a lot of TCO by putting in gateways, you would look for somebody who could do it on a larger scale and be more efficient at it. That's why cloud-based email scanning grew. And we've gotten better, and we've had luck in closing down some of the botnets, but basically that's it. But another interesting trend there was, that's when we saw the first financial incentives. That's when the bad guys changed tactics. It wasn't all about just killing networks now, it was about making money. And that trend has strongly developed to today. Today, 75% of all malware targets less than 50 users. Can anybody give me a guess how much time does it take to do a virus signature definition update? In hours. Anybody? If I say about 4 hours, then we're good. Hans Petter, would you agree?
Yeah, but 3 of those 4 hours is testing.
Yeah. So basically, that means 4 hours after a virus has been identified, we can then release protection for it in the security industry. Those are the good teams. On average, a virus lives between 7 and 9 minutes before it mutates into a new virus, because that's the way it is today. So if you use antivirus and IDP tactics that are these areas here, you might get infected without ever knowing it, because they're also designed to never be caught. And that is why we have security from a cloud-based perspective. Today, we see that the bad guys, incidentally, I'll get back to that. We see that the bad guys are targeting you individually, but we also see that it's a complete industry. Did you know, interesting funny fact, it is actually possible today, now don't do it now, do it in the break, to go to a Russian website and order a malicious code that should be written to target you specifically. You can do that today. You can also pay with your credit card. I'm not sure that's too clever, but you can do that. It is possible. Now what they do is, they're no longer hackers as we know them. Forget the Matrix and all those movies. These are professional businesses that you can go to, and they will have research teams to figure out how to penetrate a company, who is the weakest spot. Then they will have infection teams that design the code and make sure it gets in there. And then they will have data extraction teams that will figure out how to use that code later on, much later on, to make sure you get the data that you ordered. And it's not just the big companies that are being targeted. It's everybody. I read a very interesting study from PricewaterhouseCoopers. They release a study once every 2 years called the Global Economic Crime Survey, I think. You should go and Google that. Saying, for instance, in Denmark, where I am, that more than 20% of all companies across sectors and industries and whatever it is have experienced at least one cyber attack. Doesn't matter if the small bakery or if it's the big company. They target everybody for competitive information, governments, for strategic planning and stuff like that. They target everybody. A few interesting facts on that to underline it. 90% of all breaches involved organized crime targeting your information. These are 2010 numbers. In 2009, 97% of all attacks used customized malware to target your networks. So let's say it was less than 50. Well, in average, it's 15 computers they attack with the same code before it changes. How do you cope with that if it takes so long to write a definition file? Well, you use reputation-based security. You use heuristics. It's very hard to get heuristics into a piece of software that is never online. I'll get a little bit back to that. Now, the funny thing, I read a book the other day that one of the key things you need to consider in marketing is trust. I remember a bank in Denmark that got infected and crashed for like a few hours. And they didn't say, you know, if it was insiders or whatever it was. But the funny thing was, only 20% of the customers said, "Yeah, I trust them less now." That's only 20% of a globally present bank. You think they lost customers? It has more cost to get infected now, especially if you deal internationally, because you have to abide by international law, and you have to inform people if you've had a breach and everything. That costs a lot of money. So it makes sense to look at something that can protect you in real time. That's why we deliver security in a cloud-based perspective. That's also why in Symantec, the software is also using reputation-based technology now. I'm not saying we're the only people in the world that do that, because this is not a sales pitch. But we do it. To us, it's all about keeping information safe. And you can have the systems in the back end that you want. You can use virtualization all the way you want. You can use storage boxes the way you want it. You can have different backup routines the way you want it. But it's all about providing some real-time information security. What you guys probably asking yourself every day, and that's what we do when we think about cloud-based security, is how important is the asset? Is it really something that we need to keep under lock and key? Is it something that, you know, like you do a risk management, you do a risk audit on your data? When we look at the attacks or the activities, we will have a global network where we can see, does this resemble something we know? Like you guys will. Is it very normal that this user is accessing this website now? No, probably not. Okay. We'll also look at, from an internet perspective, where is this file coming from? If it comes from an IP address where we know this IP address has sent out vulnerable stuff before, malicious code, most likely we can score that as a very, very insecure file, right? So, some recommendations. We need to combat the threats with relevant, actionable intelligence. Good job, Anders. You could read aloud from the slide. I'm a great presenter. So what does that mean? Well, you need to think of a way to completely protect the enterprise. It starts with developing the policies. After you've analyzed which data you need to keep safe, of course, and you develop the policies. Now, I guess that you're probably thinking about policies and what that means, and there's also the conflict between developing a policy and then the user saying, I have a very good customer in Denmark that I speak to very often. He's the IT manager. How many of you are IT managers in here? Okay, not a lot. But this particular Danish IT manager, he always cracks me up. He says, the conflict between IT managers and users is, users think that IT managers need to support them in whatever they do. And they always think they're stupid because things never work. IT managers think that users are idiots. But we need to enforce the IT policies. That's one of the key things, and actually that's what we try and do our best to think into the services today. Then you need to protect your infrastructure. You can't just go cloud security. Hello, here's Symantec.cloud, now I buy your stuff. All right, I'll just leave an open door on my infrastructure. That doesn't make sense. I'm not saying you should ever cut local security. That's not for me to say. I would never recommend it. Nobody would, I think. Things now have developed into identity protection. That's really, really important. How many of you have LinkedIn profiles? All right. So what if I tell you that one of the favorite research items in terms of getting the first tip into getting that infected code in is researching your people on LinkedIn, figuring out how can we do a strategy to communicate to them and stuff like that. That's one example of how do we then proceed to protect the identity within the company. Because that is a favored strategy. Second, when you've got all these things down, you need to have a central, unified thing that will allow you to manage and enforce your policies and strategies. One of the key old school problems in developing an IT environment, especially when we're talking about virtualization and mobility solutions and all kinds of gadgets everywhere, is how do we manage that from a central perspective? Oh, I need one platform here and another platform there, and can they talk together? And you have to have a lot of resources available to you to do that. You need a central view, central management of the solution. But you also need to have both local and global security intelligence. This is absolutely a key in today's threat environment. You cannot rely on local solutions alone. Does this make sense? Yes? So that's why we're doing cloud-based security. Now, the best way, as I said, you have to leverage both local and global security. So the best way is not, this is not an either-or scenario. This is a both-and scenario. So yeah, cloud is good for productivity, and cloud infrastructure behind running the security solutions has proven very, very great. I'll show you why in just a minute. See, I just did that slide. Cool. So, when you look at cloud security, what is really important, you can get several different vendors on there. I'm not recommending that you choose either or. It's not for me to do. You have your own criteria. But what's really important to remember in a cloud-based security is that there is strength in numbers. You need to look for vendors that have global representation, global infrastructure behind catching all of these viruses. Because what could be a virus that is launched from Japan will hit you in 10 minutes in Norway. The thing is, they'll probably also try to infect some Japanese guy with the same base code. We'll catch it from a global perspective, and we will update that global infrastructure. That is why strength in numbers, strength in global representation is very, very important. You also need to think in some of these aspects that you're talking about, policies. Just getting a protection solution, well, that's cool, but what if you could have protection solutions that would actually allow you to do a little bit more than just protect? And then, what would be really good is, because that's also part of the security scenario, have any of you ever gotten a mail with a link to a web page where, you know, or a user of yours, I'm not saying you guys did, but clicked the link in the email, and then you found out that was a really bad site to go to? You or a user? Okay, a little bit of hands. It's okay not to say it. I mean, probably all had it. See, the thing is, back in the day, we would try just infecting systems with emails. Now that we couldn't run around with floppies because we'd already used up all our capacity of the lungs, so we tried, being intelligent and writing emails. Now, then we got all the spam machines in the world that, and the filters that caught that, so that didn't work. So now we would just send out emails with links in them. And then I would click the link and I would be redirected to some site. Then the security vendors found out, okay, well, if that's the strategy, then we should look at the link before we allow the user to go there or before we allow the email to go there. That makes sense, right? So then they came up with another strategy that said, no, okay, then it's not the first website we infect. We just put in a redirect that redirects, that redirects, that redirects, that redirects to another website, which is infected. And that strategy is actually pretty clever. So give you an example of how we thought that into the solution at Symantec is that we follow all the redirects. And if anywhere along the way we find malicious code, we simply block the email that was containing the link. Then the bad guys started thinking, how many of you use instant messaging as a corporate tool today? Okay, that's a lot. I come from Denmark, and in Denmark there's not a lot of people who use it as a corporate tool. I used to work at an IT distributor, and I wrote with resellers all day, the guys that supply you with all your hardware. And we had this communication strategy, so phone, mail, and instant messaging. And instant messaging was MSN. Great! So I would log on with my corporate email to the MSN thing, and I would write and negotiate prices and stuff like that with resellers. And I would, of course, try and do a copy-paste or something, or save a text file and whatever. And I would forget all about that file, because I wasn't that structured back then. And then all of a sudden, 3 months later, the reseller would write me and say, yeah, we got the deal, it's great. But you said that the price would be a little higher than it says on your quote. Did I? I don't remember. Oh, well, it's 0.3%. What can the damage be? Not saying it happened a lot. I'm saying I remember it happened once. But, do we have people that, do that? Yeah. Also, people now will try and infect those networks. Are any of you thinking about Microsoft 365, for instance, and looking at some of the solutions there? They have this link thing. Really, really cool platform. Well, we turn on the instant messaging machine again. I'm betting it will be a big boom in Denmark. Now, all of you have instant messaging today, so that's cool. But it's also an infection source. And rule is, of course, if you have a lot of information, more people will target it. If you use a tool on a big scale in the world, more people will target it. So we need to have a platform that can protect the messaging scope from end to end. That would be nice. And so I read that there was also about what can you actually ask for in a cloud vendor. Now you've been through this with the legal guy. One of the things you need to look for is a solution, because this is all about messaging, that will be always on. None of you could live without email for 2 days. How many can live without email for 4 hours? Oosh. I used to not be able to do that until my doctor said, slow down. And then I actually have to turn on the phone and turn it off again, and it's fun. But the thing is, we require to go to the cloud. One of the benefits of the cloud is availability, as well as scalability, right? So you should look for solutions that actually give you 100% availability. You should also look for solutions that give you customer service, because basically you pay vendors to take care of the infrastructure that you no longer have, which is why you don't need to invest in the training and diplomas and all that stuff that goes with it on the IT department. But the thing is, you also need to have protection as an SLA metric. How many of you used cloud email scanning today? Cloud email security? Okay, a few. So back to what our thoughts are on the whole managing the information flow. First of all, it's about protecting your data. We do that across all the platforms here in Symantec. This is not a sales pitch. I'll just walk you through what our thoughts are. Second, wouldn't it be nice if you had an email cloud solution, for instance, that would allow you to enforce those policies? It's very easy in a good cloud solution to define and enforce policies without the need for hardware that enforces and looks for and checks for. We also have to think in the security thing, which is once I've defined that this email is allowed to leave my network, do I want it to be encrypted or do I not want it to be encrypted? And then it would also be nice, and of course this is the Symantec Cloud product portfolio, and Symantec is archiving. So it would be very nice if we had a cloud-based archiving solution. Are any of you thinking about cloud-based archiving now? Have you heard about it and contemplating it? I'll show you a little bit about why that could be cool. So for those of you that are a little bit more like me, I'm a bit graphical. So this is how it works. The Symantec Cloud security offering, basically it could read any cloud-based security offering would work like this. The encryption part, you can actually, with several services today, you can define if I want a complete encryption tunnel between Symantec and a partner, which would be, I don't know, IBM. I want every email between those two domains encrypted, all subdomains, whatever it is. Bang, that's one encryption way. Or a municipality and a something. Or you could define if it should only be some emails. Or you could also say, oh, I have this problem because some of the users are sitting on Gmail or Hotmail. Well, there are solutions in place for that today. Also cloud-based solutions. You might also want to think about the archiving thing. So it's actually possible that every mail that touches your Exchange or Notes or whatever it is that you're running will be sent straight to the archive. You might also make sure that, what happens if our server goes down, that you can still be always on. If you happen to use smart devices, like some of us do, BlackBerries or iPhones or whatever, there are some plugins for that, supporting that users can always access every mail they've ever sent and received in their life. Now, these are some of the benefits of cloud-based solutions, because you can't really offer that on an on-premise archive solution. You can offer a lot of different things there, but this is for people who are actually focused on being always on. But that's about managing the information flow, and some of the benefits of that I'll get back to just in a second. You might want to make sure that when we surf the web, that we're always compliant. Now, you do that with firewalls today, most of you, I guess. The problem is, when I'm in Norway, visiting from my main office in, let's say, the US, if my VPN sends me to the US, what's going to happen once I click send request? I'm going to go for a cup of coffee, right? And then I get it back, and then I get this message saying, no, computer says no, can't go there. So what does a user do? He tries to what? Switch it off. Yeah, that's right. He tries to switch it off, because that's what users do. No, you're not going to control me. Well, we're not trying to control you. We're trying to make sure that everything is compliant, right? So there are solutions in place from several cloud vendors, making sure that if you have users that don't really connect inside the network, that it can still look for the policies that you have defined because they're in the cloud, and then they will know immediately if they can connect to the service or not. Now, it's pretty clever because that will give you complete compliant web surfing. So those are some of the opportunities. The last one that we have on this slide here is endpoint. If you have a lot of mobile users, The problem with endpoints is that you have to have local management infrastructure, right? And you have to connect to that to get the updates and all that stuff. And you have to manage it, and you have to make sure that you have the overhead and all that stuff. Well, with cloud-based infrastructure, you don't need to worry about that anymore. And if I take my laptop and connect to the internet in Japan or in China or in the US, it will automatically connect to the cloud service and say, so what is going on? Have you got an update for me? That doesn't take a lot of footprint. It sounds like it's very footprint intensive. It doesn't. And because the scanning technology is in the cloud, the security technology is in the cloud, no more complete scans of drive C while you just go and block that hour in the calendar. It will run a very, very automated scan. It doesn't need to scan everything. The scanning will be very much reputation-based in the cloud. So those are just some of the options, and I'm sure that you probably know vendors that where you can put even more onto the tapestry here. But the point is, you want to reduce the TCO, you want to reduce the risk, you want to increase your agility and your flexibility and efficiency, and you have to look at cloud-based security delivery models on top of what you do today, not in spite of. Strategic maneuverability. I'll just show that because that's a key thing. I was just talking to one of the guys outside, and we're just talking about, so one of the challenges today is many companies today are looking to migrate platforms, let's say mail platforms. Well, some of the options you get in cloud is that you can actually take the data off of your old platforms, put them into the cloud-based offering, then you can migrate your system while your users still access the archives. And then when it's up and running, the archive will then connect to the thing, and we will be up and running in real time. This can drastically eliminate a migration project schedule and cost. How do we think about the backup and all that stuff behind? Well, guys and girls, we have an SLA from the cloud vendor side saying your data will be always available in the data center. How do we extract the data center if we decide that the vendor is not our kind of guy? Well, we have strategies in place for exit. Ask those questions to your vendor when you talk about archiving projects, because that's key, right? So how do you gain strategic maneuverability? Well, a true life example, one of my customers in Denmark was talking about, so this actually gives us the availability to switch vendors on email platforms as I please. That gives you a lot of flexibility. We've talked about cloud-based endpoint protection. Just want to show you it's possible to do that from everywhere in the world with a cloud-based setup. You get the idea now. And this slide could be in general for cloud and not just endpoint protection. What you need to look for is solutions that are always on, predictable, and can allow you to manage them from the web. So that's just about it. And those were my words of advice. And I hope you enjoyed it. I'll take a few questions if there are any. No questions? You can ask me anything.